So my name is Naomi Brockwell. I run a research and media institute called Ludlow Institute. We create a platform called MBTV where we educate people about privacy technology, surveillance technology, and we try to empower people about how to reclaim their digital lives. And the reason why I started this is because for me, tech is neutral. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just tech. But what I have seen is a trend that over the past couple of decades, we have had technology really be hijacked for surveillance purposes. And a lot of this has been done in this very clandestine way, where we've not been told about it, where it's deliberately obfuscated, where companies are collecting data about us and deliberately not telling us, because if they told us exactly what they were doing, we probably wouldn't use their products. And governments are doing the same thing. Just huge amount of data collection, they're purchasing it from data brokers. And so I'm seeing this world of tech that I think is a beautiful world. It's an empowering world, it's an exciting world, it's going to lift everyone's standard of living. And I also started to see this world become demonized. People start to think that tech is the problem. You know, if you want privacy, throw out your digital devices because surveillance and technology are synonymous. And I had a lot of issues with this. Tech is neutral. Tech is not surveillance. Tech doesn't have to be surveillance. Tech can empower all of us. And so I started to just kind of look at this trajectory and how we slowly were like a frog in boiling water. The situation crept up on us. And suddenly we're at this place where I think we're at a pretty scary tipping point. And I wanted to change that. I think we're at this fork in the road, and if we keep going down this path and not reclaim our rights, we get to a scary place. But we're at a fork, which means we can choose. You know, we could build more empowering tech. We could build tech that gives people back more freedom in their lives. We can build tech that allows people private communications. We get to choose. But in order to get people to make that decision, they have to care about this. And that was the biggest obstacle that I found. I found that people were quite complacent. Who can guess what the most common response I get when I talk about privacy is? Anyone? What's the most common response?
I'm not doing anything. What do I have to worry about?
What do I have to worry about? What do I have to hide? I'm not doing anything wrong. So this was probably the biggest barrier that I came across, is this complacency. I've got nothing to hide. And so I just started to do a lot of research into what happens to a society if you lose privacy. Who can guess what happens to a society if you lose the ability to be private?
Gestapo?
Gestapo. That's, yeah, in a word, basically. So people they take it very personally, right? I'm a law-abiding citizen. I am virtue signaling how law-abiding I am by proclaiming that I have nothing to hide. And it's like they're giving themselves a gold star. I feel great because I feel like I will always fit within the norms that society imposes on me. As if that's something to be proud of, right? Like, to hell with those people who live on the fringes and who are individuals and who don't necessarily fit in like I do. I don't care about their rights. And so I just feel like we need a little bit of a reframing. And it's like, I ask the question, how do we get to this point? Why are people so eager to put their hand up and say, well, I have nothing to hide. Why do you care? You're not important, you know? You shouldn't worry about this. What are you, James Bond? Why do you need to protect yourselves? And so, like, I think one of the most powerful arguments against that is to remind people it's not just about you, actually. And I don't mean that in like it's not about you, man. Like, I actually think it's really not about our personal choices. Privacy has hugely broadly societal implications. And the real question we should be asking is not whether we have something to hide, it's whether we want to live in a society where no one has the option of privacy. Because what happens to whistleblowers? What happens to human rights workers? What happens to investigative journalists? What happens to protesters? What happens to anyone who dissents against bad laws? Can anyone name like any bad laws throughout history that you're glad were changed because brave people stood up and fought against them? Like, just think for yourself. Think of some bad laws. And then think, what if society had no option of privacy at that time? They had no ability to organize in private, to discuss how to push back against this law. And what if entrenched interests had such pervasive surveillance apparatus that they could just target these dissidents because they didn't want the status quo to change, we would be stuck in a society that didn't evolve, that is just like stuck in the dark ages, that treats people unfairly. It's a good thing that we're able to change laws and evolve as a society and get better and make things, raise the quality of life for everyone. And we lose the ability to push back if we let entrenched interests take away our privacy. And so there's this great quote from Eric Schmidt of Google where he says, "Maybe if you have something to hide, you shouldn't be doing it in the first place." And it's like, all right, that's a little bit scary. Then you have there's this great quote from this UK politician, and he says, "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." And you start to look around you and you realize you're being fed this propaganda from all directions. Companies whose vested interest it is to spy on you are telling you that, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about. And governments are telling you just toe the line and everything's going to be fine for you. We have to ask ourselves the question, how can we guarantee that tomorrow's government is going to treat us fairly? Like, are we always going to toe the line? Can we always guarantee we're always going to agree with the people in power? We can't. And that's why privacy is so important to preserve in a society, because laws change, social norms change, and our data is forever. And so if we allow this surveillance apparatus to become so entrenched that people lose the ability to have private communication, to organize privately, we lose privacy for our future generations and their ability to push back if someone horrible gets into power and we want to organize against them. That's a scary future. So that's my background and why I do what I do. And I started this movement called privacy accelerationism, because I think that the debate in society about whether or not privacy is good, I think it's too late for that. Like, we all agree privacy is good, and in an era where we have constant laws being, put forward year after year saying that they're going to ban end-to-end encryption, and they're going to mandate backdoors in all of our apps, they're going to eliminate the ability to have any privacy on the internet. That's really scary, and we need to fight against that. And we no longer have time to be questioning whether privacy is important. We actually have to lean into it and fight for privacy. It's getting pretty dire. We need to be pushing back against bad laws that strip the most vulnerable people in society of the ability to remain private and correspond privately with people. And given that our entire lives have really migrated to the digital realm, we're not just talking about communication, we're talking about all of our activities. We're talking about what we do in our private lives, the books that we read, the videos that we watch, the things that we learn about. All of this stuff is now tracked, and that information is routinely just used against us in ways that we may not even realize, to target us with certain political content, to get us to think in a certain way, to target us with certain viewpoints, to get us to hate certain types of people, because suddenly we think they're hating us, because that's what we're being fed. And so we really need to not be naive about how important this data is and how powerful it is in understanding us and making us vulnerable to manipulation. It's a new era, and we're all pretty vulnerable, but we have to really wake up for it. And the more we can carve out private spaces in our internet lives, the more autonomous we are, the more independently we can think. We're not necessarily led by those pop-up ads that are in there. They're actually blocked. We don't even see them. There are certain browsers you can use where you don't see that content. There are platforms you can use where you don't get fed those algorithms. And I think that it's a good thing for society to start leaning into that stuff. I don't like a world where people are easily maneuvered. I want to see people be able to think for themselves and come to their own conclusions, whatever conclusions they may be. I just want the individuals to retain the right to think independently, to act autonomously, to live their best life free from coercion and manipulation and all of that. So I think we need to accelerate this movement. And so just to sum up, and I want to actually go to some questions to see where you guys are with all of this, but I think some of the ways that we can accelerate this, people in this room, everyone here is pretty techie, I'm guessing, considering where we are right now. So contributing to open source software that is creating privacy tools, auditing code, looking for bugs. You could be testing products. Maybe you're not as techy, but you want to try out these things. You could be giving developers feedback about the UX. How, is this, if you were a protester in a vulnerable, in a dictatorial regime and you were really vulnerable, is this product, are the default settings going to protect them, or is it hard to use? Do they understand what kind of privacy they're getting? Can you suggest improvements? If you're just using tools and maybe there are some guides there, maybe you've used something and you're like, I can create a tutorial. I can show others how to use this. Maybe the tutorials out there aren't particularly comprehensive. Maybe you can translate them into another language. You can even do that with AI these days. You can translate it super easily, but maybe that would increase accessibility to some of this stuff. So I think the key things are changing culture, like pushing back when people say things like, I have nothing to hide, is important, because we have to reframe the narrative. And it's been hijacked by people who benefit from surveillance. And I think we need to reclaim that, because I think we have a right to privacy. Privacy is not about hiding. It's simply about consent. It's just about us having the choice to decide who gets our data and who doesn't. I think it's about understanding what privacy tools are out there and promoting them, spreading awareness about them, teaching people how to use them. And I think it's about building new ones. So if you're particularly creative and you've got side projects you guys have got going on your weekends, maybe do a privacy side project. Maybe create a tool that you think would be helpful for someone. That type of stuff, we need so much more of it, because those who wish to strip privacy, surveillance technology is just advancing so much faster than privacy technology. And I think it is because privacy tech has been demonized. We're told it's only for criminals. People are scared of working on it. People think that it doesn't matter, so they don't feel compelled. So I do think we need to change the conversation and encourage more people into this space so that we can start to keep pace again. The future's not written. We're at a fork in the road and we can keep going down this path. It's going to get worse. Or we can really fight and just shift it and make sure people have privacy tools, make sure that they have private communications, make sure that they have the right to speak freely with people, free from coercion from people who might want to target people like them. I think all of that stuff's super important. So that's kind of like a really quick, in a nutshell, of why I think privacy is a super underrated concern right now, and why I think that it's important that people understand what's coming down the line for future generations, so that we can make a change now. Now's the perfect time for us to stand up and change it. Future's not written. We can absolutely write a better one. So I want to turn it over to you guys. I presume everyone here, if you're here at like a privacy talk, you're probably interested in privacy. Who's interested in privacy? Yeah. Who's not interested in privacy? You guys just scared to put your hands up. You're not scared. You're not interested in privacy. All right. So who, out of the people who put their hands up, is implementing anything in their life that helps them reclaim any sort of privacy? Any tool at all? Yeah? What are you using?
I used to use Signal pretty heavily.
Signal. Who uses Signal? Who knows what Signal is? Who doesn't know what Signal is? Okay, Signal is an end-to-end encrypted messenger. End-to-end encrypted means that basically you can talk with someone and even Signal, the company itself, cannot access your data. It's end-to-end encrypted, meaning the sender and receiver are the only ones who have the key that can open that message. That's great, because you can use this infrastructure, but you can have private communication with someone that can't be intercepted, as opposed to SMS, which is completely interceptable, or some social media DM where you're literally just handing over your private conversations to some company to analyze and add to a profile about you, sell it to data brokers, sell it to governments. So Signal is a really great tool. I highly recommend it. Very easy to set up. What are some other tools people use? What was that? You block Origin. Great. So browser extensions that can block tracking. uBlock Origin is a really great tool. There are also private browsers that will do a lot of that stuff by default. So Brave browser will use uBlock Origin's block list and have that integrated natively into their browser. Anyone here use Brave? Yeah, so anyone here use Chrome? Listen, statistically, 90% of you use Chrome, so I know you're lying if you didn't put your hand up. Chrome is the most widely used browser in the world. It has a huge market share. It runs the internet. So there are better choices. I would say that's probably like the lowest hanging fruit that you can choose, is just swap out your browser. It gives you a huge amount of privacy. Because if you think about it, Chrome is doing the following. First of all, they are one of the few browsers in the world that still allow third-party cookies. Every other browser has like had them, blocked for years, but Chrome, every year they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna block third-party cookies, and then they just kick the can down the road. They're like, well, we can't do it this year for these very important reasons, but absolutely next year. The next year comes along, they're like, well, we definitely considered it, but we have to postpone it another year. So they keep kicking it down the road. Somehow we still have these third-party cookies that follow us all over the internet. So anything you're doing in Chrome, there are all kinds of like tracking pixels as well that are following you, as well as these cookies. There are all kinds of bounce tracking that goes on. You know, when you're looking at a browser and in the bottom left-hand corner, you see these addresses just kind of pop up. It's just a split second, there might be a few of them, and then it sends to your website. Yeah, they're literally bouncing you through ad tech to track everywhere you're going. It's one of the repercussions of some browsers blocking third-party cookies, is they've just started to put that, basically the cookie element into the URL itself. They track you across a bunch of different websites so that they can still monitor your behavior. You can eliminate this super easily. Just switch out to a more private browser like Brave. A really low-hanging fruit, and you will get the same functionality. You can import all of your bookmarks and your whatever else you want to import, your passwords with a single click. Just click that button, import. You just immediately have the same setup as before, but with way more privacy. So that's the first thing I'd say. And then in the URL bar, whatever the default search engine is. Who uses Google? Don't put your hand up. I know the answer, because Google, again, 90% market share for searches, right? So I know you're all using it, and they're great. Google is amazing. They've had their spiders crawling the internet for a really long time. So they've indexed everything. Is there anything you want to find, you will find it on Google, because they've indexed it, because they're just really good at this. And they know so much about you, they will show you exactly what you want to see, right? And they know so much about you, and every time you use them, they know even more stuff about you, and they're going to add that to the profile about you, and they're not just giving you search results you want to see. They are selling that in this fire hose of data to countless entities. Who knows how many Google ad partners there are as part of the real-time bidding system on Google? In the US, it's 4,000. Who can name any of these companies? Not only can none of you name them, so you have no idea where Google is actually giving your data, but even if you were to look up the names of these companies, you will not find Wikipedia pages for most of them. They are shady, shady shell companies. There's a great book called Means of Control by Byron Tao. He is a journalist who looked at these real-time bidding systems and did a great investigative dive into this, drawing links between different government entities and government contractors and the people buying this data. So yes, your data that you put into your Google searches is being collected by shady government contractors all over the world, in regimes that probably would not like people like you, probably would not like independent-minded people who want to make the world a better place and fight entrenched interests. So we do need to start thinking about who's getting access to our data and looking into this a little more. But luckily, it's super easy to just switch out your search engine. I would say 2 years ago, Brave Search was really bad. Who knows the difference between a meta search engine and a pure search engine? All right, so there are different kinds of search engines. You've got search engines that will index the web themselves. They have their own little spiders who are crawling and finding web pages and following link trails to basically say, we mapped it all out, we can show you what you're looking for. And then there are search engines that will basically wrap those results in their own front end. So, things like, there are certain search engines that will just use Bing image search, but they'll call it theirs, and maybe they'll pass your searches through a proxy. They're like a meta search engine because they're not doing the indexing themselves. They're using someone else's indexing system. They're just wrapping it up. So what Brave did was they said, well, actually, we don't want Google indexing all of this because maybe they're not indexing everything. Maybe they're tilting the scales by deciding what they want to index and what they don't. Maybe they could be suppressing content. Maybe they could be stopping the free flow of information. We don't know, but they're a big company. They probably are a leverage point for a lot of governments around the world who might also want to censor content. So Brave is like, all right, we'll index it. Gosh, but Google really had a head start on them. So you can imagine starting from scratch, be like, okay, spider, fly, be free. The index is like a handful of search results. People look in Brave, like, what? This is terrible. I can't find anything. Fast forward 2 years, Brave search is amazing now. I mean, they've been indexing for a really long time, and I actually, in the early days, would have to default back to Google search a bunch. These days, I don't. I don't think I've defaulted back to something else for a really long time. Even if I had to, I don't have to use Google. I can use a private front end for Google. Something like Start Page they use all the same Google search results, but it's a private front end. They use like a proxy server where they strip out your IP address before sending you to results. They use archive a lot, so instead of actually sending you to the pages, you can actually look at an archive version. So lots of things to reclaim your privacy. So I think search engine is super important. And keep in mind that, let's say you're typing in that search bar and you're like, I'm going to ask the internet a question. It's going to be very personal. What do I do about treating this rash? And then you're like, oh no, that's too personal. I'm going to delete it. Well, it's too late. Every keystroke you've typed into Google search engine has already been sent off to Google, and that's how they know to give you all the search suggestions, right? Every time you start to write that, and they're like, what should I do about this kitchen sink? What should I do about this cupboard I'm building? What should I do about, and they start to autofill it, right? Because they're collecting all of your keystrokes even before you hit enter. So keep that in mind. Everything is being collected there. You could easily search over for more private searches. What other privacy tools? Who else put their hand up? They're using some sort of privacy product.
Just a simple one that I like to use on the browser is a Clearlinks one that removes like tracking.
Yeah, Clearlinks. Okay, so when you look at a URL and it says mydomain.com/ equals XYZ percentage sign, exclamation mark, and it has like this long trail. Ever looked at like an Amazon link? Those ones are crazy. Inside the link itself, they've looked at they've embedded what page you came from previously, what search terms you looked for in there. They're mapping so much stuff that we don't even know about because they've got random identifiers in there. But generally, everything at the end of that is going to be a tracking link. So you can use something like Clearlinks. Brave, for example, will automatically strip what they can identify as a tracking portion from your links before sending you there. So even if you click on a tracking link, it will eliminate that before it even takes you to the website. And they also do a thing that stops that bounce tracking, sending you through. So they will learn which website you're intending to go to, and they will blacklist all of these tracking websites that are in the middle, and they will basically just send you from A to C instead of passing you through B first. And they also, let's say they haven't learned it, let's say they can't figure out how to get you there, they silo all of your searches within their own sandbox search. So, for example, if you look at this website, then you go to this website and this website, instead of being able to correlate and track those, every single instance will be sandboxed in its own environment. And so if you go back to that website, it's sandboxed again. So that company can't be creating a profile on you knowing that you're a repeat visitor, for example. There are other private browsers. I think if you're looking for a good browser, go to privacytests.org. They map out all kinds of different tracking that can occur, and they rate the most popular browsers as to how private they are, which things they're actually blocking. I think that Molvad also scores really highly there, so they are generally known as a VPN company, but they released a browser a couple of years ago. Really great product, so it does very well in these tests. There are a bunch of them there, so you can take a look at those and see which ones you like, but tracking links are important things to understand. Who else uses a privacy tool? DuckDuckGo. So again, searching, if you're searching on the web, there are absolutely more private alternatives than using Google. And what did you find when you switched from Google to DuckDuckGo or to any other private searching?
It was a lot less results. Instead of hundreds of tabs to go through, I only maybe
off of one well thought out search, I have 30 links to look at and decide which one's the better link.
So a really interesting anecdote about that, because, and for the recording, we're just talking about how on Google you have, tab 1001 or whatever. And you got a lot of search results from there. So a friend of mine years ago decided that she wanted to actually look at every tab. And was Google actually giving us all those results? So she created this program that went through and opened every single tab to see, and it stalled out at around 25 or something. So Google's telling us they're going to give you everything on the internet, but actually when you go to try and find what they're giving you, they're like, nah, we decided you shouldn't see those other things. We've ranked them lower in our search algorithm. Don't worry about those results. There are technically 1,001 pages, but we'll just show you the first 25. You're good to go. And so it's interesting, this illusion of more choice that we get with a lot of these products, and how seldom we verify what we're actually getting through them. Any other privacy tools?
I use Cloaked, and I stopped giving my phone number out easily these days.
That is so good. So unique identifiers, huge. Who has ever heard of a thing called a data breach? You people who work in computer security in this audience. So I think it was the former president of Cisco who said there are two types of companies in the world. There are those that have been hacked and those who don't yet know that they've been hacked. And think about every single entity that you have given your phone number to. You've given it to every government department you've ever interacted with, every medical provider, the thousands of merchants that you did business with last year. They all have the same telephone number. Who has one telephone number that they use for everything, and they give it to everyone? Put your hand up, every single person in this room. I've got someone who's shaking their head. Excellent, if that is correct. So you don't have to. Maybe when we all had landlines, we couldn't have 40 separate lines going to our house. It was not feasible. But we live in the digital age where our calls are mainly routed over the internet anyway. So you can absolutely have 40 different VoIP numbers, and you don't have to worry about having 40 different telephones that you're picking up and you're confused. No, you just have it in a single app. It all works the same as all those numbers just get routed to this one app, and it calls and you answer the phone, and it's great. So there are services like Cloaked that will allow you to generate a new phone number for every single business you do business with. And at the outset, this probably seems really foreign to people. They're like, how do I keep track of these numbers and all of this stuff? It's easily. There's just a list that has the number and the name next to it all. And when people call you, it just pops up on the dialer as being whichever company it was associated with. So what does this help you with? Well, it stops people correlating all your activities from these data breaches. So if I knew your telephone number, and because I can literally just search you on the internet and probably find it in 2 seconds if I know your name. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to look in data breaches. Now I have his number. I'm just going to see what other accounts he's used this number for. Suddenly, I have a very vivid picture of all these different activities that this person does in their life. And maybe I might start trying to hack those accounts. Maybe I might use that information for phishing scams. Maybe that information is being harvested by data brokers, because they absolutely can do this too. And you can bet that they're going through all of these data breaches to learn more about you. So we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to have that one unique identifier we give to everyone. And so getting away from that, I think, is important. It's not just phone number, it is email address. You probably have one email address you use for everything. There are alias services. People shaking their head. I love that. That's how I know I'm in a good crowd. But you can use alias services where, again, you just generate a new email address for every entity you do business with. All gets sent to your same inbox, so it's it doesn't add any inconvenience to you. But it also helps you figure out who's selling your data. So if you give this unique, if you give some alias address to Betty's Florist, and you've used Betty's Florist at simplelogin.com, and then suddenly this banking company starts sending you emails to Betty's florist, you can bet that Betty sold your data. And if you look at her terms of service, you'll probably see that she has permission to do that because you clicked agree when you bought her flowers. So it's a great tool for actually mapping out and seeing how your data's being used, who's getting access to it. I don't even give my real name when I deal with merchants. Why do they need to know what my name is? I don't give my real billing address. Who knows how I get around that? Illegal activity. No, not at all. So there are things called masked credit cards. Who's used a masked credit card? Yeah, and masked credit cards, you can give any billing address, any name, and your transaction will still be approved. It's wonderful. Basically, you sign up for a service, and due to federal regulations, you have to KYC with that service. But if you look into the terms and conditions, a lot of these mask card companies, they're going to treat your data with a lot more respect than Betty's florist is. What kind of security protocols has she got with storing your credit card information? But these companies are designed to really encrypt that data. So if hackers get into their system, they got to jump through a lot of hoops to get that. And so you KYC with them, and then basically from then on, you can create a new credit card number for every merchant. That means that if Betty gets hacked and a hacker steals that credit card number, actually, that was a one-time use card that I set up with Betty. So the hacker's not actually going to be able to steal any of my money. It's really, really great. I can add any billing address, so they don't have to know my home address. If I buy something from someone I don't even know, give them exactly where I live. That's a little terrifying. We somehow normalized it. Just make up a billing address. That's still going to be approved online. And in terms of deliveries, that's another side of things. You can get around it with the credit card by using one of these masked card numbers. And also, before I move on, masked cards have other benefits, right? You can set up a one-time use card, or you can set up a card for recurring donations, but put a maximum on how much each month can be taken out of the account. You can tie those cards to specific merchants. So if I want to only use it at Betty's, if someone tries to use it at Chevron gas station, they're not going to be able to. It'll be declined. There are amazing tools out there that we can take advantage of, so we don't have to give thousands of strangers on the internet a home billing address. And then deliveries. Who has a PO box or a PMB? It's a great tool. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to give strangers on the internet your home address. Who can think of examples? Maybe you're buying an expensive watch. You're going to get that delivered to your home address so that some stranger on the internet who just processed your transaction knows what valuables they can find in your house. Maybe you bought a safe. Who uses safe for anything other than your expensive jewels or whatever? Maybe you bought a crypto hardware wallet. Oh, damn. You're maybe part of the ledger hack where they literally were not storing your information correctly and a hacker got in and then a bunch of crypto people got targeted because they gave away their home address and their billing information, and now you have criminals roving the country, going from state to state, I'm sorry to say it, kidnapping people, torturing people to get access to their cryptocurrency. So that stuff happens. And so it's important to understand that in this digital age, there are all these different threats that have come along with it, but there's all this amazing privacy technology that's come along too, but we have to use it. We have to take advantage of it if we actually want to protect ourselves. And it's not just, as I said, the personal choice that this is going to help you guys protect yourself. You're sending out a market signal. You're telling other companies, hey, I value my privacy because I'm opting for this company that's doing right by me. You're voting with your dollars. Your vote matters. It's really important. And so I think that we can start claiming that power, leaning into that power. And the more we lean into these companies, the more we help them be sustainable. Even if it's a FOSS tool, if it's free and open source, there are developers who are probably killing themselves to keep these things maintained for you guys. So send them a donation, keep them sustainable, support the people who are supporting you. I think FOSS is great because it means that everyone can get access to privacy, not just those who have enough money to do it. But if you do have enough money to contribute $1 a month, do it, because that's what enables people with no money at all to be able to still access these tools. So just support them if you can, and that also sends a signal to the developers that, yeah, I can make tools and make it sustainable. People will use things that are valuable to them and help us maintain it. So that type of stuff is really important. How are we going for time, by the way?
34 minutes in.
Amazing. So more privacy tools. And if you have specific questions about things that you guys are interested in, let me know, because I probably have some rant about it. You're like, oh, I'm sorry I asked.
Do you bring both the browser, which is Firefox-based, instead of Chrome?
Yeah, that does really well. Yeah, it does well on privacytests.org. That's another one that that is a really good choice. But if you want to see which specific trackers that they block, you could, take a look at that website. But I would say that that's right up there with Malvad and Brave in terms of privacy guarantees.
Live USB without persistence.
Oh, okay. Anyone use Tails? Anyone not know what Tails is? Okay, so let's say that you're an investigative journalist and you're constantly getting people sending you things, right? It seems pretty hazardous. It seems a bit crazy, right? Because people are sending you attachments and sending you links and saying, hey, I've got this intel for you. It's going to be a big scoop. Just open this stuff. It's kind of your job description to look at that stuff. How do you protect yourself? Or maybe you're a dissident in a dangerous country and you know that your computer is like this treasure trove of all of this information that just gets collected and built up over time. Like, is there a way to navigate the internet more privately? Well, if you think about how your usual computer is organized, you've got an operating system on the computer itself, and it like touches everything on the device, right? If you download something malicious, you've kind of screwed up your entire setup there. It's unless you're using some Linux distro like Cubes, and you've got everything siloed, and your life is kind of chaotic as a result. You can also use something called Tails, which is a super interesting operating system. The operating system itself is on the USB thumb drive. That means it's also portable. That means that you could potentially like go to an internet cafe and spin up like a computer and do things. It just opens up this whole world of opportunity. So what does Tails do? So the A stands for amnesiac, meaning that like it forgets everything that you've done during your session. So if you're thinking you can boot up this operating system and all your files and docs will be there, that's not going to happen. Like, you can set up some persistence on there if you want, but the point of Tails is that every time you do this, it's wiped clean everything that you did in the previous session. It's storing it in memory, in the RAM, and so that's just getting wiped every time you log out of there. So it's a really interesting tool. I would say it's for higher risk categories. Like if you're traveling abroad and you want to always have like private communication methods and access to the internet with you, you can just take a thumb drive, and it's just a really handy tool to just spin it up. You boot up directly from the USB. It has a lot of built-in software already. So there are email clients in there that use PGP, for example. There are private browsers automatically built in there. So it comes with apps pre-installed that are very much geared towards privacy. So by default, you're just getting a ton of privacy on one of these tools. So worthwhile checking it out, just as an investigation for a curious mind. Try it out. It's actually super easy to just install this on a thumb drive, and then you can just try booting it up. And what does that mean? It means that if you're ever in a position where you need privacy, you've already figured it out. You don't have to be scrambling and making mistakes and making yourself vulnerable. Maybe you're going to a protest or something, or you're fighting back against power, or, you don't really know what's going to happen. It's just really nice to know how to use these tools in advance so you don't have to scramble. Like, it was interesting for me when, on like the night that Russia invaded Ukraine, the instances of people downloading Signal and downloading Tor skyrocketed. Now, think about that. Suddenly you're like, oh, there's like a hostile regime in our territory. I should probably protect my privacy. But then you're scrambling, and it might be a little too late, and you don't really know what kind of danger you might be in. So knowing how to use these things in advance is great. Like, we don't have to wait until situations are dire to get comfortable with these tools, and the more comfortable we are with them now, that actually helps support them. It supports these ecosystems, and privacy loves company. So if you're testing out things like Tor, maybe you're not doing anything bad. Maybe you literally do have nothing to hide, and you feel pretty safe. You're actually helping people by using Tor. Because if you think about it, the only time that you ever really would need to use Tor, it's kind of slower, it's cumbersome, it's a hefty tool for privacy, so you probably need it. you're probably in a dire situation. So does that mean that all the traffic on Tor is just people doing things that are really dangerous? That's not great for privacy either. You know, you got like 100% chance of intercepting traffic and being like, well, they're doing something sketchy, or they're fighting against, you know, a totalitarian regime, or, you know, but if normal people are using these tools too, suddenly the anonymity set grows to all of us. If privacy becomes the default in our lifestyle for a lot of things we do, we make it more private for the people who really need it. And that's power. Like that's really important work that we can be contributing just by shifting our choices. Now I mentioned Tor. Anyone not know what Tor is? Yeah, so the onion router, it's basically, instead of your computer taking this package and sending it out to the internet, it's going to wrap it in a bunch of different encryption, layers of encryption, and then it's going to send it to nodes in a network, and each node gets sent to, one of those layers gets peeled off like an onion layer. And so by the time it gets to the exit node and actually gets out to the internet, the people who've had access to that don't know all the information about it. No single entity knows both where it came from and what the information was that was being searched for, because it was mixed around with layers of encryption that couldn't be penetrated in this network. So it's a really cool tool. It's also obviously a tool for accessing the dark web. So we think of the dark web as being like this scary dark place, but actually it's just kind of an unindexed part of the internet. With different onion sites, and you can access them. They're not going to necessarily show up in Google search results, but you can use Tor browser to go to these sites and access this whole world of the internet that you probably didn't know existed. Who knows what kinds of things you can find on the dark web? I'm going to ask this gentleman. Give me a name of one website.
A lot of different news organizations have dropped sites, so anonymous tips can be submitted.
Yeah, so it's a great privacy tool for using things like that. If you want to give tips to people, if you're a whistleblower or anything, you can use that. You could probably look up like your favorite content creators. Maybe they have created a darknet website that's literally just mirroring their content on the normal website, but maybe someone's just privacy conscious and they don't want to access it on the normal website, so they choose to use an onion link instead. Really cool tool. All right, anyone else have tools that they think other people should know about?
How about Proton Mail?
Proton Mail. So who uses, I'm not going to ask it, Gmail. Yeah, you all use Gmail because they have like a 90% market share because Google runs the world. So Gmail. Let's take a step back, right? Why is Gmail offering you free email? What do they get out of it? Like, they must be really kind, right? They're just like, hey, guys, take this free email service for the world. Take it. We ask nothing in return. Like, is that how it's operating? No. They literally created this free tool so they could analyze every single message that you are receiving or sending. And if you ask the average person, like, is this a private message I'm sending? Most people would think it is. They're not thinking about the technology going on under the hood. They're just thinking about the one person they're corresponding with. I'm sending that email to my lawyer. It's confidential and privileged information. I'm responding to that message from my doctor. It's private, and I would not want this broadcast on social media. I'm sending a breakup note to the love of my life, but it's very personal and deeply touching, and that is meant just for their eyes. And I'll be mortified if suddenly my family were to read all of this and everyone sees the kind of language I'm using. People think of their email as private, and yet in reality, we're all using services that are analyzing every single thing we're doing. And we're also still thinking of this in terms of like humans analyzing it. You know, I'm not worried. Like, what could a single human get? Like, they can't read every email, right? There are too many emails in the world. They're not looking at everything. They're absolutely looking at everything. AI technology, these large corporations have had powerful compute for a really long time that they have been using to analyze everything that you're doing in your email. It comes in, they scan it, it gets logged, and things are like tags are added to basically put this information in a digestible format for a computer. So every single thing. It's probably tagging the kind of relationship that you have. It's tagging what it thinks your political persuasion is, your sexual orientation. It's tagging what race you are. It's tagging like what kinds of people you hang out with, your social graph, how often you talk to these people, how many emails per week you send. All of these things are being tagged and used to profile you. Your emails are not private. They're giving away this service for free because you're the product, and they're selling your information to thousands of entities, right? And I mentioned real-time bidding before. Who understands how real-time bidding works? Who's heard of that term before? Yeah, we've heard of it. All right. The way it works is, for example, you go to a web page. There's like split second before the web page loads where the writing appears, but there are like empty boxes, like a split second, and then suddenly it all gets filled, the page gets decked out. What's happening in those split seconds? Those boxes are being auctioned off. Google is saying, hey, Naomi's just opened up this web page, and this is everything about her. Here is a fire hose of all the tags we have linked. She is this political persuasion. She has this many accounts. She lives in this area. She knows these people. She really likes cat videos because she's a weird cat lady. They're telling them everything. And what happens? They send, it's called a fire hose of information. They broadcast it out and they say, this is everything about her. Who wants to bid on the right to get in front of her? Who wants to bid on her eyeballs? So what's way worse than Google selling your data, they're not even selling it. They're sending this information out to free to thousands of partners who may not even bid for the right to get in front of me and get my attention. They're still getting the information. So what do you end up with? You end up with thousands of these companies who are their real-time bidding partners, scraping these results and adding to them to their own data collection and then selling that on. It's like data brokers all the way down, right? So yeah, one person will end up say, I bid 2 pennies for the right to her eyeballs in this moment, and then the page loads and their ad will appear in front of you, and it's a highly targeted ad specifically to who they think you are. But those thousands of other entities still got your information, and that's how real-time bidding works. And it's not just Google. There are countless advertising systems that do this. Facebook has their own in-house system that works pretty much the same way. You scroll through your feed. There's a split second before something in your feed loads, and that's an ad that someone has highly targeted. Did anyone see that Signal ad campaign that they did a few years ago, and Instagram banned them? It was hilarious. So Signal wanted to do an experiment and see how granular this targeting could be to basically educate people about this. Like, this is actually what these advertisers are seeing when they try to target you. And so they created this ad campaign where, like, if I was scrolling Instagram, I would suddenly get a result that says, hi, Naomi, I hear you're considering going back to Australia in 2 weeks. Maybe it's to see your cat named Penelope. I hope that you and your sister have a great time. I also like that new shirt you bought, or something like that. It's just going to find ridiculously fine-grained information about who you are. And Instagram banned it. They said you cannot use our system for this. So it didn't go through, but Signal did a great write-up explaining what they wanted to do with this system, just as an educational tool, because I think there's a disconnect between us understanding the data that's collected about us and what's actually going on behind the scenes with all of this. And as I said, these thousands of companies, in the US, I think it's like 4,000 partners. I think in Europe, it's 2,500. Because GDPR protects everyone, am I right? Only 2,500 partners there. So yeah, this is happening all over the world. It's something we all need to be aware of. And it could be really helpful, some of these privacy tools that are helping educate us about what's going on, just so we can make more informed decisions. Maybe you still use Instagram, totally fine. Use it from an informed place. Use it from a place where you understand what's going on and you're choosing to make those trade-offs. Don't use it because someone is putting blindfolds on you and hoodwinking you and trying to mislead you into thinking something else is going on. Go in with your eyes wide open and own your choice. I think that's a really empowering place to be in, and you can just make better decisions with an understanding of what's going on. What else have we got? Let's talk about AI. Yeah? Who thinks that AI is the death of privacy? Tech is neutral, guys. Tech is neutral. It could be used for surveillance. It could be used for privacy. So let's discuss that, right? First of all, there are private ways to use AI tools. And right now there are some large companies that you should be mindful of. You may still choose to use these companies. Again, just go in with your eyes wide open. And with a lot of these services, everything you type in, it's being added to this data set. It's also being used to train models. And AI training is complicated. They're not storing data sets. That's not how AI models work. It's not like they've ingested all the Wikipedia pages of the world and it's just like a database you're querying. It is a mathematical representation of things that it's learned. So like you have an input, you put it in, you tweak parameters. What do we need to tweak in order to get this output to represent the actual data as closely as possible? So it's like a complicated thing to understand, but imagine like this web of dials that are constantly being tweaked, and they're called parameters. And so let's look at, like, who's heard of the Llama model? It's an open source model. Right, so you've got 70 billion parameters, you've got like 40 billion, you've got 7 billion, you've got different sizes. That's the number of these parameters. So that's how many dials had to be like tweaked, is the way you can kind of think of it, in order to create something that will really closely mimic things that it has learned. So for example, maybe it's doing like word prediction, and it has learnt that in a certain context, you're talking about this subject, and it's learnt that more often than not, the sentences and this kind of information is added. And so these LLMs is like a complicated thing that goes on, but basically these LLMs are like really complicated word prediction things, like large language models. They're large because they've got 7 billion parameters. They're language models because they're learning by language, they're outputting language. And they're models, meaning they're not data sets, they're mathematical models. They're these like complex algorithms, you could think of them as, that are doing all this stuff to the data in order to give you a certain output. So that aside, the technical aspects of that, what's going on when you're using these large companies? Things like ChatGPT or Claude or some of these very well-known things is your inputs, and you know how you have those up votes, you have the down votes, you can tell it like, no, give me another answer, that's not what I'm asking for. All of that is information, and it's saying you either did well, large language model, or you didn't do well. And those companies are taking that information and saying, okay, we're going to use that to tweak the next parameters in the next model. So then they'll bring out a next model that they'll release. And that has used the data from your inputs to train it. What does that mean? It means that it's not just simply a matter of your data being in this data set, and if you say, I would like my data to be removed, they can just delete it. No, it's like incorporated in this really complicated mathematical model. Once your data is used to train these models, you can't ever get rid of it. So you have to be aware that the inputs you're putting in they're not only being collected and stored in a database attached to your profile so that every single prompt you've ever asked it is queryable by that company. And if someone wants to subpoena that information, or if someone hacks that information, they can see really personal stuff that you've been talking about. It's not just that. It's that your responses and things that you've trained it on could potentially end up as answers to other people's questions, right? So we've got to think about AI in terms of what information would we want them to have. I wouldn't recommend putting your home address into one of these things. Hey, help me with my cover letter. Here's my information. Naomi Brockwell. I live at South Budget College and room 151 or something like that. You know, I'm not going to give them that information. So be judicious about what you feed it, because that information is being used to train it. Now, there are other models. You can actually use cloud-based models that are more private. So Brave, again, has something called Leo. Has anyone tried out Leo? It's really cool. So why it's more private is, first of all, you don't need an account in order to use it. So they're not collecting this centralized database of all your queries. They have a no logging policy for everything they do on Brave. So every search result, all of that stuff, none of it is logged. But when you use AI, it is not logged either. So the Brave Leo AI interacts with whatever web page you're on. So that also means that you could use your browser to read PDFs. And you can use the Leo AI LLM to interact with that PDF. Translate it into this language, summarize this for me. None of that stuff is getting logged at all. I think you can feel pretty comfortable using Brave's Leo and using it privately.
Train a model.
How does Leo train a model? They don't. So there are different things going on. Even when you use ChatGPT, you'll notice that you get to select which model you're using. Your inputs aren't going in to train that model. Your inputs are those models are already trained. They're isolated existing things that have been created in the past and exist on their own. Those inputs are being used to train future models. So these are companies that are both developing the models and developing more future models. Leo is just a front end. It's a UX for accessing one of these open source models. And you can choose which model you want to use. So I think by default they use Mistral. And you can also say, well, I prefer to use Llama. So what they're doing is they're just taking existing models and nothing is being used to train it because that model already exists. That exists itself. It was created years ago. And so you're just using this model and drawing inferences from this already existing model. So that's the difference, is that if you use one of these companies that's not actively training models themselves, you're already going to become more private. If they have a no logging policy, even better. There's something called Venice.ai, which is, I don't think it's as good as Brave's Leo, but it basically is a private front end where they do no logging through this front UX. Then they pass it through your query through a proxy server. They strip out your IP, and then they send it to this distributed system that all these distributed computers are hosting models, and your processing is done in this distributed network. They hope to switch over to something called Morpheus Network, which is a decentralized compute network, but it's still being actively developed. In the interim, they use something called, they use a mix of Akash and Hyperbolic. So both of these are kind of like Airbnb for GPUs. So people will rent out their computing power that they're not using. So you'll send your stuff through Venice. They won't log it. They'll put it through this proxy server. They'll send it out to one of these Airbnb computers that are hosting a model. The reason I say it's not quite as good in terms of a privacy perspective is although the front end has a no logging policy, you don't really have control over who gets access to it on the back end, and we haven't yet figured out how to do encrypted compute, encrypted inference. In order for someone to run a prompt through a model that they're hosting, it needs to be decrypted. And even if it's encrypted and there's something in their computer that is handling the key, the administrator of that computer, you should presume, is always going to have a way to get access to that prompt. We haven't figured out how to end-to-end encrypt that, meaning that the user is both ends and it's just passing through this system in a private way. So if you are sending your queries out to a cloud or to someone else's computer to be hosted, you have to think about that from a privacy perspective. The way I think about it is ChatGPT is like the worst in terms of privacy. Still an amazing tool, but be aware what you feed it. So I'm not going to feed it personal details about myself. Even if I take out my name, they still have a centralized database that they've collected everything I've written. They're building a profile on me. So I'll just use, generally I use it for things that I'm going to be publishing publicly anyway. You know, it's not information it's private. Something like Venice, I'm going to be careful never to identify myself. I figure as long as we don't have a central database building a profile over time, there's far less information that could be garnered, even if I don't know what the logging policy of all these disparate processes are. So I won't feed it my name, and I'm just going to be a little more careful about what kinds of information I give in case it identifies me. Like, I might not give it my name, but if I'm like, and my YouTube channel, MBTV, you know, so just be judicious about that. Brave, I trust a lot more because they have a no logging policy. I know who's running the compute and I trust their logging policy, but ultimately you have to decide for yourself how trustworthy a company is, whether you want to trust them. That's going to be a personal decision. But then the most private of all is hosting yourself. Who's tried to host an LLM themselves? Who's tried recently? It's gotten really good. So like maybe a year ago, it would have been really buggy and slow and all this. These days, you can literally take one of these open source models that's been pre-trained, it exists in its entirety. You could just download it on your computer. It's, again, 7 billion parameters. is not going to be a data set of all of this stuff that is taking up a huge amount of volume. It's just a mathematical representation. So it's incredible how powerful these tools are that we can run on our home machines now. And like a 7 billion parameter model or anything that's single digits is definitely going to be viable for an average laptop. You're not going to need like specialized equipment. If you try to use like a 70 billion parameter model on your computer, you better have a really good home computer, because you're just going to spit out one word every 10 minutes. It's going to be real slow. But single digits, you can absolutely use. So I would recommend something like Ollama as the interface. So they're like different levels of components that you need to run one of these. You need the model itself. You need an AI engine that is interfacing with that. And sometimes you need a more user-friendly interface that you can interact with the engine as well. So I would recommend something like Ollama, which allows you to browse different models, choose what you want. It's a command line interface already, so very easy to use. You just download it. You can get it set up in like 10 minutes. It's pretty simple. If you want a graphical interface instead of using command line, you can use something like OpenWeb UI. It's also pretty easy to set up, and that gives you that really nice chat prompt box, and you can start to tweak models and train models yourself, set up your own parameters. It's a very high-powered tool that you can start experimenting with. So my take on AI is not that we need to avoid this because it's terrible and just a surveillance tool. No, it's just tech. And you can use it for amazing things, you can use it for bad things. And I think that if we don't lean into all the cutting edge technology around us, we are going to get surpassed by the people using these things for surveillance. So not only can you use this stuff privacy, I think privacy conscious people need to develop this stuff. We need to lean into it. We have powerful compute at the disposal of anyone who has a laptop now. Let's harness that power so that we can have privacy technology catch up to where surveillance technology is. And so I've been thinking about this in terms of what does the world of AI mean for privacy? Because we hear a lot about like facial recognition technology and how all these inferences can be drawn about us, and how AI just knows so much about us, and how this is terrifying, and we've sort of demonized AI as a result. But the way I think of it is data brokers and governments and large corporations have been using powerful compute against us for a decade. These tools are not new for them. They're just the only ones who had these computers at their disposal. Now suddenly we get access to them. Everyone goes crazy and gets terrified because they're only just finding out that this stuff is even possible. We should be rejoicing because this stuff is finally in the hands of everyday people. We're starting to balance the scales there. Instead of this power asymmetry where people are using this tech against us, all of us have powerful compute right at our disposal. So let's brainstorm, how could we use this? Think about a world of deep fakes, right? If you live in a world where you can no longer tell the difference between what's real and what's not, what does that mean for privacy? Because in my opinion, it means that we've just rendered the whole business model of data brokers obsolete. They literally exist on the premise that they can create profiles about us and sell accurate information that people can use. And suddenly we have the ability to generate all kinds of completely believable noise about our lives. They're going to go out of business. There's no way they're going to be able to sell these profiles on people and claim that they're accurate if we're able to generate completely believable noise about our lives. That's a powerful obfuscation tool right now. I can think of a million ways that this tool could be used to help privacy. But all I hear is people with this disempowered narrative. And people will write to me and say, Naomi, what happens when these governments get access to powerful AI and use it against us? And I respond and say, what happens when powerful individuals get access to this powerful AI and use it to protect their privacy? I think that we need to just reframe the narrative and remember that tech is neutral. It may have been hijacked. It may be used against us. There may be a lot of resources taking us down this path, but we're all smart, empowered people. We can create tools that help give people back their privacy. We can harness the same cutting-edge tools and this amazing computational power for the benefit of billions of people. That's empowerment right there. That's a really exciting future. But we have to take it. We can't just talk theoretically it could happen. We have to build it. We have to be the ones to do this. No one's coming to save us. And if we're not equipped to build these tools, We need to help evangelize the people who are building them. We need to help give feedback to those who are using them. We need to start normalizing the use of these tools, because if it doesn't become normal for people like us, it's not going to be normal for the average Joe who doesn't know anything about computers. They think privacy is just for criminals. No, it's us. We have to be the vanguard of this privacy rebellion, you can think of it as. We have to push back against the status quo and lead the charge, because we're the ones who understand technology. We understand what's at stake. We understand the data collection that's going on. We understand how to use these tools. So we're the ones who can teach others how to use it. We're the ones who can build more. We're the ones who can provide feedback. We're the ones who can create tutorials. I think that the people in this room are incredibly empowered right now, and you need to understand how important you are in writing the future. It's in your hands. There's no one else who's going to step in and do it for us. Like, we have to be the ones to do this. So just remember that every time you feel a little bit disillusioned. Just remember how much power is in our hands in terms of the cutting edge tech that exists right now, and brainstorm. We have computer clubs, the Mad Hatters Club, spend a brainstorming session. Think about, okay, what are some cool ways we can use AI technology to empower people, to give people in hostile regimes back their freedom, to allow people to exist on the internet without being monitored. So think about that. I think that you guys can really make a huge difference, and that's really exciting. Did you have your hand up as well? Oh, time. All right. I think we're running out of time. If you guys want to ask any more questions, I'll hang around for a little bit. And if you wanted to learn more, we have like 600 free videos online that teach you all kinds of different aspects of your privacy life and how to improve it. It could be overwhelming, but honestly, just go for the lowest hanging fruit first, because there's super easy switches you can make in your life that reclaim a huge amount of privacy. So you are absolutely more empowered than you realize, and the future is brighter than ever if people like you lean into that power. So thanks so much for having me.